Hey guys, we're a little early. Actually, it's right on time, but we'll give it a few minutes, maybe 1 or 2 minutes until I get going, just to give people a moment to log on. Anyways, I'm really excited. So glad that everyone is joining me and us for this really fun evening, cooking paella, one of my favorite things. I'm excited to have it for dinner. I hope you are too, or at some point you'll be cooking it and sharing it with some friends and family. So just gonna give it 1 minute and we'll get started. Okay, well, we'll get started and people can join in as we get going. If you have any questions, feel free to post them as comments. I'll do my best to respond to them. Afterwards, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to send an email to cafeaion@gmail.com or hit me up, Soifer on Instagram or Cafe Aion on Instagram. And yeah, I'll do my best to get questions answered. I can always email a recipe or questions like that. I guess to back it up, my name is Dakota Soifer. I am the chef owner of Cafe Aion, as well as Brasserie Boulder and Little Bubs, two new takeout only restaurants that we started during the pandemic. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. We're going to be cooking and I'll have some more time to chat about different things as we have pauses during the cooking. But most importantly, I want to thank the Boulder Public Library and the Boulder Library Foundation for the very generous donations and support that they've given to this program and many other programs in this series. Without them, this wouldn't happen. It's really cool to be a part of this wonderful series, offering great cooking classes and classes in general for free. Something we can all do from home safely, enjoy ourselves, make the most of life. Okay, with no further ado, we're gonna cook paella, Paella Pan. I know some of you may have purchased a paella at home kit from Cafe Aion. If you did, some of the steps that I'm going to be showing you can be combined or skipped. I'll do my best to let you know how that works. But for everyone else, I'm going to show the complete process from just having all of your ingredients from scratch to completed. In the link to this event is a shopping list. If you need to find it later on, again, feel free to reach out anyway. First off, make sure you have all your ingredients. Second off, pour yourself a glass of wine. It takes a little bit, but luckily there's times when it's just kind of hanging out. The stove is doing most of the work, which is really nice. It's great for entertaining, hanging out with friends. You can have dinner on the stove and be enjoying some cheese or charcuterie or some olives or whatever and chatting. Makes for a really nice social dinner. Okay, first off is the base. This is the really flavorful base that's gonna go into flavoring our paella. If you purchase the paella kit, you have this ready for you. You can just kind of hang out for a little bit. If you're doing it from scratch, we're gonna start building it right in the pan. That's gonna be the onions, the garlic, the tomatoes, the saffron, and the smoked paprika. That's gonna get simmered down together to make that paella base. The recipe is, I believe, written for a slightly larger amount of base, and you get to save it and put it in scrambled eggs or freeze it and use it in the next batch of paella or whatever. But we're gonna go ahead and just cut that bit in half, and that'll make a nice amount for what we're making today. So, pan, olive oil, I don't know, 2 or 3 tablespoons of olive oil should be fine. A nice glug. Yeah, olive oil is great. You can't have too much. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this on high to get things rolling. Going to go ahead and throw onions. I kind of took my half onion and sliced it pretty thinly. You can chop it into squares, whatever. Also, I have some garlic, about 4 or 5 cloves chopped up. That's gonna go in there as well. And we're gonna let those get nice and soft. I like to use a little spoon. Michelle, if you're watching, this is your spoon, I'm sorry. I'll give it back to you at some point. So yeah, we're just gonna let these guys go until they're, like I said, soft. They're gonna start and look a little translucent. So this is gonna happen for a bit. Just wanted to say a quick hi. My parents, John and Deb, are watching in Maine. My brother is actually tuned in from Japan. And this is kind of cool. It's a way that we're all able to connect and do something together. Growing up, cooking was really important to my parents, and it was always a family activity. And we're not doing it together this holiday, which is a bummer, but it's fun to be able to share it over Instagram, over Zoom, all these different things. And I would encourage everyone to do the same. Maybe start a new tradition. Maybe paella is your tradition. Maybe roast gooses, or maybe it's just, you know, touching base at a certain time. So anyways, wanted to say hi to my family out there. Some other friends in Maine I think might be checking in. Nate, what's up? But it's kind of fun. I guess that's the silver lining in this all, that it encourages us to reach out to those near and far. Even the ones near, we've got a neighbor, Bev, just down the street, that usually we would, you know, get together and have a beer or go for walks, but unfortunately that's not happening, but it's fun to be able to connect this way. So, I don't know if you can hear, but we're getting some sizzling going on here, and I can see that garlic and onions are starting to get some nice color. I'm gonna turn that down to like a medium heat, about like that. I don't want them to, you know, a little golden brown is good, but we don't want them to burn quite yet. Actually, we don't want them to burn at all, but we're just gonna let these continue to sweat. As far as procuring your ingredients, if you're gonna watch this and refer to it later on, it will be saved in the archives and updated to Instagram TV, IGTV later on. So you can always come back to this if you want to cook it at a later time. But yeah, basic ingredients can all be found at King Soopers, at Whole Foods. Cured Specialty Shop on West Pearl Street is an awesome place for finding great specialty ingredients, as well as at Cafe Aion. We do sell the rice and pans and the whole kit if you want to try it at a later time or give it to a friend as a gift. So, we're starting to get things looking golden brown. starting to get the onions and garlic to be cooked through, looking slightly translucent. Now I'm gonna add in our saffron, which is super tasty. We get all of our spices from Savory Spice in Boulder, just off of Pearl and Spruce Street. They're awesome. Dan, the owner, is an amazing supporter of all things local and just a really great guy. So I'd encourage everyone who hasn't gone in there to go in. I believe you can even order online and get things shipped if you wanted to support him that way. So saffron's going in. That was like a nice pinch. And also some smoked paprika, pimenton as it's known. It gives it a nice smoky flavor, a little more body to it, and a little more of that great color that we associate with the delicious paella. So we're just gonna let those cook. You're gonna see the oil is picking up some of that beautiful red color from the saffron. The onions and garlic are as well. And after, I don't know, a minute or so, we will have let all of those great flavors and colors just really infuse into our onion, garlic, and olive oil base. And then it'll be time to add the tomatoes. I believe the recipe calls for like 28 ounces. It's kind of like the larger canned tomato can you can buy at a grocery store. We're doing like half of this. If you had some fresh tomatoes, that would be fine. You can just chop those up and throw them in, but I think the canned are nice. You get a little bit of the juice, the skins aren't in there. The flavor becomes nice and concentrated. So you can't smell it. It's smelling really nice. You're smelling that delicate saffron aroma. The smoked pimenton is coming through. We're gonna add in the crushed tomatoes. I like giving them a little squash with my hands, helps them break down, release the juices. It's kind of fun to do, therapeutic if you're into those sort of tactile things. This is a good time to wear an apron if you're concerned about getting squirted with tomato juice. If not, it's all good. So that's about half the can, which, as I mentioned earlier, the recipe that was given is for a larger amount of the base. If you're making that amount, that's fine. We'll just scoop half of it out before we add the rice. Folks that have the paella kits at home, if you want to start getting ready, as soon as this is kind of cooked down and simmered together, we'll be adding the base and starting in about 4 or 5 minutes. So I'm going to turn this back up just a touch and really let this juice and tomatoes all simmer together. You can see that it still looks just a touch watery, maybe a little liquidy. We want it to kind of cook down into a nicer, thick, something you would think of as like a pasta sauce consistency or, ragu. So a couple minutes, we'll be adding our rice. Speaking of the rice, traditionally, in Spain, the best rice is what's called bomba. Comes from the Valencia region in Spain. That rice sometimes can be found at Whole Foods. Like I mentioned, Cured carries it. We carry it at Cafe Aion. If you don't have it, really any short-grained white rice will work. Probably not sushi rice, but arborio, which is the rice traditionally used in Italian risotto, is a great substitute. Or just a standard short grain white rice will work just fine. The beauty and the interesting facts about arborio rice, risotto versus paella is they're great, and they both have a fair amount of starch to them. In risotto, you're stirring constantly throughout the process, and those starches come out of the rice, and you're stirring them, and they get incorporated into the dish. That's part of what gives it that really beautiful, creamy texture and mouthfeel. In paella, we're not going to stir the rice very much at all, and that starch is going to fall to the bottom and slowly cook on the bottom of the pan, forming what's known as the succurat. And that's one way to tell if you're getting a really great, delicious paella, is if you have that crispy, almost burnt layer of rice on the bottom of your pan. And that's actually the starches slowly falling down. Starches, when they cook, turn to sugars. Sugar, when it gets hot, caramelizes. So you have this beautiful dark brown crust on the bottom of it. It's really kind of cool how different cultures have different terms and ways of achieving that delicious rice crust. Persia has its own way, Spain, but there is something about crispy rice that sort of transcends our political and geographic differences. Okay. As you can see, it's not looking watery at all. It's looking really nice. It is time to add in our rice. So it's a little over a half cup if you have a 10-inch pan. I'm cooking dinner for my family, so we have a 12-inch. I'm going to use a little more. Add that in. If you have the paella kit at home, now's the time to go ahead and add your rice and your paella base and your stock to the base. I'm going to give this all a little mix. I'm going to add a couple nice pinches, maybe 3 pinches of salt. I just use kosher. 2, 3. And we can always taste along the way and add more if needed. It's a whole lot harder to take the salt out than put it in. So that's all nice and mixed. Now I'm going to add some stock. If you're making a vegetarian paella, you can use vegetable stock. You can use water. This base is really flavorful, so if you don't have stock, no sweat. You could add a splash of white wine if you wanted, but I'm just going to go with some chicken stock. I think we'll start with maybe like 2 cups. Got a little half-cup measure here. And if you do happen to have a paella pan, what I kind of like to do is I look at these rivets where the handles are held in and use that. I'll go almost up to those for the first amount of liquid I'm adding. Again, we can always add more as we go, but it's hard to take it out. So I'm going to start just under those, turn it up to bring it up to a simmer, and then we'll do that. Now that we have our rice and stock and base all together, I'm going to start adding in the ingredients that take a little longer to cook. So for a paella with chicken and chorizo, that's going to be those ingredients because we want to make sure the chicken's completely cooked as well as the sausage, and they have a chance to give off their flavor and really enrich the dish. If you're going to make a vegetarian and you have some butternut squash or cauliflower florets or something like that that really benefit from a long cooking time to make sure they're not raw, now is a great time to add those. So I have some bone-in chicken, some wings, some thighs. That works great. I like things with the bone. I feel like you get a little more flavor out of it. If you have the kit, you have our chicken confit. That's a great time to add that into there. It has some good flavor that'll be going into it. And you can just kind of set them in there, nestle them in as best you can. You want them more or less submerged or all the way to the bottom. And we have our little link of chorizo. If you have the kit, you have our house-made smoked chorizo that's loose. You can crumble that into here. I'm just gonna slice the link I have. And if you don't have chorizo, you could use andouille, you could use Italian, you could throw some ground beef in there. Again, paella is really great because it lends itself well to adding whatever you want. When farmers markets are going on, it's a lot of fun to pick ingredients out from there and add them in, just sort of highlighting whatever happens to be in season. If you check out the Boulder County Farmers Market website, they still are offering some really unique ways of getting local produce. And now is a great time, if you're able to support those farmers, as well as incorporate them into some delicious dishes. Okay, our chicken and chorizo's in there. We're gonna let it cook and simmer for quite a while. And we're just kind of hanging out, drinking wine at this point. We'll check in, we'll taste it for seasoning and salt. And when it's getting closer, we'll add in our shrimp, because those will take maybe 5 to 10 minutes to cook in the liquid. But if we added them now, they would be overcooked. Same thing if you're doing a vegetarian paella and you had some peas or some chopped scallions or something you were going to add that's a little more delicate and doesn't take very long to cook, wait to add them so they don't get overcooked, they can turn brown or whatever. So now is a great time, if anyone has any questions, to go ahead. I can answer those, or I can continue chatting a little bit about Cafe Aion, how we ended up. Cafe Aion is 10 years old now. We turned 10 in April. It was kind of a funny time to celebrate our anniversary. But yeah, the part of the inspiration in opening Cafe Aion and the reason I chose Spanish cuisine was, I guess, sort of two parts. First was, oh, we've got a question.
Someone asked, are we keeping this on high or lower?
Good question. Once it comes up to a simmer, temperature-wise, I'm going to turn it down to keep it at a low simmer. So I would say on medium-high until all of the ingredients.
Sorry, I have more questions going.
Yep. And we're going to just keep it at a simmer. Next question.
Were we supposed to have the base yet?
Yes. If you had the at-home paella kit, now would be you would have the paella base, the rice, the stock, all in there, and to that you can add your chicken and chorizo. That's what we have going so far. If you haven't added it, no worries. Throw it in, give it a little stir, and we'll let it simmer.
What makes a paella pan special and different from other pans?
Great question. Do you even need a paella pan? No, you probably don't. You could use any sort of 10-inch pan. I mean, I've even made one out of a cast iron pan or something like that. What makes the paella pan special is it's a thinner carbon steel pan. It's usually pounded and it has a flat bottom. Interesting story. Paella got its start from way back when there were Romans marching around and people were having wars and stuff, and they had their shields and they would just be out, doing their Roman army thing and be hungry at night. They would have some dried rice with them. They would make a fire, put their shield down over the fire, throw their rice in there, a little pinch of saffron, and then maybe they would catch a rabbit, maybe they would be near the ocean and find some fish, maybe there would be a wild boar or something, throw some meat in there, some water, maybe they had some wine, and let it simmer that way. So what makes it special is it's flat, kind of looks like a shield, and lends itself well to creating that crust.
Someone just said, just wanted to clarify that you're adding the chorizo uncooked.
Yes, the chorizo went into the paella raw, as well as the chicken. It was going to be simmering for at least 20 minutes from when I put it in, and it will be cooked by then.
What is your advice for a 10-year-old who likes to cook who wants to become a chef?
The young chef. I would let them cook as much as they can at home. I can only imagine the horrible tasting pancakes my parents had to taste when I was young and trying at it. I have a daughter who's now 13, and I think just encouraging them to try it as much as they can. The library has quite a few of these online free videos that I think are a lot of fun. I know I saw one. There was a tween girl here in Boulder making cookies. So I think it's really cool for them to see other kids doing it rather than only adults teaching these classes. That can be really reinforcing. And maybe reach out to a few of your favorite restaurants. I know we would have a kid come in and wash some dishes and see what a real kitchen's like. Those personal connections can be pretty cool from internship.
How do you get the saffron to dissolve evenly?
Even if getting the saffron to dissolve evenly, even if in the beginning, when it's in the oil and onions, it's not looking so even, you have to remember it's going to be simmering in here for half an hour, 45 minutes, and it will certainly dissipate and really evenly flavor your dish over the time, even if it's not looking like it right when you add in your tomatoes.
Cody's dad says he was cooking at a very young age. Wing it.
There we go. My dad, remembering when I was making a mess in my childhood home, and just winging it, experimenting it. I mean, food is fun. It's fun to make the mistakes, and you learn, and should never feel bad about it, especially even as an adult. I make mistakes and screw dinner up at home sometimes. I mean, professional chefs are cooking the same dish over and over and over, sometimes 100 times in a night, and that repetitiveness, at least for me, is really a way to learn a lot about it. Yeah.
Just to clarify, we do not stir it.
Yeah, yep. Again, I have not been stirring it. If you want, if something looks uneven, you can give it a shake. It is really nice to look at your dish and make sure it's cooking evenly. Sometimes that will require turning your pan, moving it on your burner, moving a few things around. That's absolutely fine, but I'm not stirring it like you would a risotto or a stew or something like that. The chicken, I had larger pieces. They're not totally submerged and they're raw. So I'll give them a little flip just to kind of make sure all the sides are cooking evenly, as well as getting that great flavor. You can see that it's starting to soak up that beautiful saffron color in there. But yeah, you can certainly move things around and mess. It's not going to detract from it, especially in the earlier stages. But in general, I'm not going to stir it very much.
Can you use a paella pan for cooking other things like omelets or crepes?
Good question. I have never tried to use my paella pan for something else. I'm sure you could. I think you would just want to be careful because it is so thin that it can get awfully hot awfully quickly. It works well with paella because there's all this liquid and rice and mass that's distributing it. But it would be a fun experiment. It's really big. We have some huge paella pans that we like to cook at the farmer's market with. And I always get the question, usually from kids, about cooking a huge pancake in it, which I haven't done, so I don't know if it works.
Okay, someone says, I'm confused by the amount of base to use with 1/2 cup plus 2 tablespoons rice.
So the amount of base you would want to use for that, for a 1/2 cup, a little over a 1/2 cup of rice, would be a little more than a 1/4 cup of paella base. If you had the at-home paella kit, that's, you probably got a little bit more than that, but a big 1/4 cup is what you want. If we're doing it from scratch, like I said, about half the amount that's listed in the recipe is what you would get. I'm not sure, do we have any more questions? That's our Paella Base update. So maybe we could come check out the paella. You can see starting to come together. Simmering pretty well here. Don't worry if you think you put too much paella base in there. It's going to be delicious and really flavorful. It really shouldn't affect the outcome at all. As long as it's kind of too late anyway, so it'll be delicious. It just might be a little heavy on the tomato, which I think will be super nice during this time of year. If you were going to add some wine to this, in the beginning with the stock is when I would. So you saute your onions, your garlic, saffron, all of that good stuff. Add in your tomatoes, and then wine and some stock. I would probably go white wine. Yeah, really any short grain white rice would be awesome in there. If it's even medium grain, would work well. If you can avoid sort of a longer grain aromatic, something like jasmine or basmati, wouldn't give you quite the same dish, but it's just sort of your standard King Soopers, medium grain white rice will work fine. But yeah, drinking wine, if you're, I see some folks talking about if you're going to put your drinking wine in there, I think that's fine. Again, it's a really fun dish. It's not sort of an exact French classic dish, so you can have fun with it, enjoy it with your friends, laugh with family over Zoom, however you might be interacting with folks, or enjoying a night to yourself. I have had a lot of fun just nights alone, that it's a treat sometimes to cook a nice meal for yourself. And if you do that and you're not able to eat a whole paella, pro tip, it's delicious the next morning with a fried egg on top. Really tasty breakfast. Okay, so good thing to do after it's been simmering a bit is we're gonna just check it for seasoning. It tastes like, there's a good amount of salt. I'm not gonna worry about adding more to it, but if it does, now's a great time. The more liquid that's in there, the better the salt's gonna distribute and evenly season everything in there. Question about what other tasty proteins are good to add. Rabbit is actually a very traditional Spanish one. Not easy to be found, but you can. Steak is super tasty. Stew meat, things that take a longer time to cook, can be really delicious. Lamb as well. Even if it's like a nicer cut, if you have some prosciutto or salami in your fridge, you can add it in. Just add it at the end so it doesn't get overcooked. And also, you could go seafood if you're craving a visit to the ocean. Paella del Mar, so clams, mussels, shrimp. You could even add in some chopped up cod or another whitefish is really delicious. I've never tried it with something like salmon, but I think whitefish is probably the move.
Someone asked, is this your kitchen?
Yes, I am at home in my kitchen. We actually, almost a year ago, started a house addition remodel, and we are cooking on plywood countertops. Again, don't take yourself too seriously. But yeah, it's a treat to be at home. Cafe Aion is closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. So I'm at home cooking on my plywood counters, which at some point will change, maybe. But anyways, as you notice, we're starting to lose a lot of our liquid. And you can start seeing the rice popping through. And before all of that's reduced, I'm gonna start checking the rice to see if it's cooked. Which I grab a few grains, taste it, and you're gonna want it to be completely cooked through. Not crunchy, have soaked up all of that delicious liquid. Yeah, so to me, looking at the paella like this, you can still see a lot of liquid in there simmering around. I would say it probably has about 10 minutes. And this is where it kind of gets a little tricky, is being able to look at your paella and judge how much longer you have. And when it's going to be finished in, say, 10 minutes, if all your liquid's going to be cooked. Because ideally, you have no liquid left the moment it's completely cooked. And that way, you don't have a soupy paella. It's moist, it's cooked through, but it's also dry, and that sucra on the bottom has formed. So, I'm gonna add just a touch more stock. And I'm also gonna add my shrimp, because about 10 minutes, I think, is about the time it'll take. Shrimp, mussels, clams, fish. If you had, some cooked sausage or something you wanted to add in, now's a good time. So I'll just set those shrimp in there, kind of nestle them into that liquid so they can simmer right in it. As well as we have some roasted peppers. If you had your paella kit, these came with it. I'm gonna add those. These are fully cooked, but we want them to be nice and warm with the dish, as well as giving off that delicious roasted pepper flavor. Okay, so again, I'm keeping the heat on medium-low, just a nice simmer in the pan, and I'm not stirring it. You saw me flip the the chicken, give it a little shake, make sure it's even, that's cool. In a few minutes, I'm going to add in the shrimp, flip them over. I added the shrimp. I'll flip them over in 5 minutes to make sure they're cooked completely through. But at this point, I might be yelling at some of my guests to get ready to eat, or help me set the table, or make the salad. So I would say we're about 10 minutes out from eating.
Someone asked, how do you manage cooking the paella at the cafe?
Good question. So at the cafe, it actually looks pretty similar to this. We actually have the Paella Base, the onions, garlic, tomatoes, saffron, and paprika, all mixed together, already cooked. So when an order comes in, we'll put the Paella Base, the rice, and the stock all in the pan to get it started. That allows us to kind of skip forward about 10 minutes, as well as having a nice, consistent, really flavorful base. Then from there, we would add vegetable stock if it was a vegetarian paella, chicken stock if it was a chicken one, seafood if we were doing a paella del mar.
Someone asked, shelled or unshelled shrimp?
Great question. I think it's totally up to you. If you prefer not to deal with the shrimp shells, unshelled is great. But some people love the shells, and you can add those, and they'll give off a little extra flavor. If you're really feeling wild, maybe New Year's Eve, you're looking for a great dish, you could cut a lobster in half and throw it on there. And you're gonna get amazing flavor, and the residual steam and everything that's coming from the paella would cook it. When in the past years, when we would have people into the cafe to eat, we would have a paella, a lobster paella as part of our New Year's celebration.
Someone asked, how do you prepare roasted peppers at home?
So if you're making your own roasted peppers at home, really good question, there's sort of two options. One is you could turn a burner like this, if you have a gas burner, turn it on and put a whole bell pepper over the flame and wait until the outside really starts to turn black. Using a pair of tongs, you could turn it around and let all the sides get nice and dark, and then quickly throw it in a plastic bag and let it cool in that bag shut. The plastic bag's gonna allow the steam to come out from that, and the skin will be a lot easier to peel off. Once the skin is peeled off, you have a roasted pepper. You can chop it up. The other option is you can cut them in half, take the seeds out, and put them skin side up and set them in an oven or a toaster oven on broil. Same thing, once that skin gets black, throw it in a bag, steam it, rub the skins off, and you have roasted pepper to chop up. Okay, so as you can see, we're starting to dry it up. I'm gonna take a peek at the shrimp, and you can see the one side has started to turn white and is a little firmer. That to me shows that it's starting to cook through. So I'll flip these guys over and let the other side cook. And I would say in about 5 minutes, we should be good to go. And again, no one's stove is even or perfect. So I constantly will give it a little twist and, just kind of to ensure that it's cooking as evenly as possible. Funny story, how we started cooking paellas at Cafe Aion is when we first opened, we were tapas only. I thought it would be cool to have a restaurant that you would just come in and snack and bars, and really envisioned it more of a bar with some food. But people were coming in and looking for more food and dinner. So we decided we needed to add that, and an old boss of mine, one of the owners of the kitchen where I was the chef, came by and he said, "Oh, I found all of these old paella pans in the basement. You should do something with them." And so it was just sort of that happenstance that we ended up making paellas and putting them on the menu. And over the 10 years, it's been a lot of fun to sort of make that our signature dish, and we cater with our huge 3-foot paella pans, people's weddings and birthday parties, and I've probably cooked 1,000 paellas, if not more. Many cups of rice, which is a lot of fun.
Someone said, have you ever spent time in Spain, or how did you learn how to cook tapas and paellas?
Great question. How did I have visited Spain, but actually it wasn't until a little after I opened Cafe Aion. I really loved Spanish cuisine because I loved the idea of kind of sharing, and to me it seemed informal. Either a bunch of tapas or a big paella, people digging in and ordering throughout the night and eating and drinking wine. And I just love that style of eating rather than the more formal, you have your appetizer and I have mine and now entrees. And it just seemed a lot of fun. As well as the ingredients that are found in Spain are quite similar to ones you can find in Colorado. They're both high, arid climates. Lamb is grown, chicken, herbs, onions, potatoes can all be found. Obviously, we don't have seafood in Colorado, but we can support a lot of our local farmers here and cook sort of traditional dishes. If we were a Thai food restaurant, it would be a little trickier to work with our local farmers to source those ingredients. So, let's check the rice. Sorry, I was reading comments and questions. Rice is tasting pretty good. It's been simmering for about 25-30 minutes, so that makes sense. As you can see, there's not a lot of liquid left in there. If you shake it, the rice is really starting to stay put. The shrimp is looking nicely cooked. So I'm gonna just continue letting the liquid simmer, the rice cook, and keeping a close eye on it as the liquid dries up. That sucrot that I was talking about before, the way the starches fall to the bottom and you get that crispy layer, is gonna start forming now. This is sort of when the excitement starts happening. As an addition to looking at it, using your sense of smell is really helpful. I can smell the paella, the tomatoes, it all simmering right now. But soon, when you're starting to get that sucrot forming, it's gonna start smelling slightly more caramelized. And if you smell something burning, that's a sign to turn it off, or at least turn it down.
Someone asked, what is your favorite tapas to have while you're waiting for a paella?
Very good question. Favorite tapas? I love just simple charcuterie and cheese. Jamon, maybe a manchego, maybe a fresh goat cheese. Olives are always tasty. One of my other favorites that are really fun to make are bocarones, which are marinated anchovies, olives, and a papaya pepper, which is a pickled, slightly spicy pepper. And you sort of skewer them. If you're having gin and tonics or cocktails, that tapa pairs particularly well with them.
Another person asked, what is a good wine to pair with a paella?
What wine to pair with paella? Luckily, paella goes great with just about any wine, but it is a lot of fun to be a little more specific. So one of the obvious differentiations is if you have your meats and things like that in there, is a red wine. Tempranillo is a very classic Spanish varietal and pairs very well with a lot of food, as well as Garnacha, which is another varietal indigenous to Spain. If you're doing a seafood paella, I would suggest a white wine, Godeo, which is another varietal of grape indigenous to Spain, is delicious. It has a lot of body. It can really stand up to all the tomato and acid. We got a question about chorizo. We actually make our own chorizo at Cafe Aion, but you can find great dried chorizo at Cured in Boulder, or Whole Foods usually has a nice fresh chorizo. Just wanted to, quickly, when we added the tomatoes, yes, I did use half of the liquid as well. You can use all of it, and you might not need quite as much stock. And also talking about why the starches fall to the bottom. Again, in a risotto, you would stir your rice while you're cooking it. And that starch gets incorporated into the dish, giving it a really kind of creamy feel, very rich. In paella, those starches, as they cook, come out of the rice and fall to the bottom of the pan. Down there, starch, when cooked, starts turning to sugars. And when sugars get hot, they slightly caramelize. And that way, you're going to have a crispy rice bottom that after you scoop the rice out, you get to scrape the bottom of the pan. And rather than just kind of burning whatever's on the bottom of the pan, the starches give it a nice, delicious crust. So, we're getting close. And I'm gonna actually take a peek here and just take a look and see what the bottom of my pan is looking like. I don't know if you can see that, but it's starting to get a little dark. And to me, that's the sucrot forming down there. And as you can see, there's really no liquid left. I am pretty darn low on my flame. And I can tell just by smelling that it's starting to cook. And that I'm starting to get that caramelized, dark smell. My shrimp is cooked. Chicken looks good. Not raw. Sausage is done. I think that it's just about there. I'm going to do a final check on the rice. Rice is cooked. I think we're good to go. Again, everyone's stove is a little different. Maybe yours was on a little high or on a little low. Again, taste the rice, see if it's done. Go lower if you need to. Add a little more stock if your rice isn't quite there. It could take 45 minutes. It could take 55 minutes. There is those varies, and that's kind of what makes it fun. Everyone's different, but if all of the ingredients end up in your dish, it will be super delicious and flavorful. So with that, maybe I'll take a scoop so you can see what that sucrot looks like. I'm just gonna scoop some out here so you can see that some of that rice has caramelized on the bottom, and if you scrape it, you get some of those nice crispies, and that is the sucrot. It's very hot. But anyways, other interesting facts. Did want to let you know that the Boulder Public Library has put together an awesome little list of all of their Spanish and similar cookbooks. So if this has intrigued you, or you're interested in checking out some other tapas recipes, or just Spanish Mediterranean cooking in general, go over to their site, check out their list. They're an amazing resource for our community. And like I said as well, feel free to reach out to me, D. Soifer, or Cafe Aion, if you have any questions to follow up with. But that pretty much wraps up our presentation on paella. I just want to thank everyone so much. I would also like to thank my helpers, my daughter Zaya, my wife Michelle, and baby Leon. And yeah, just want to wish everyone happy holidays and hope you are safe and enjoy a little bit of cooking with family near and far. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Have a
for
great
your support,
night.
everyone.
Thank you.